Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of the LACUE webinars. My name is Paula Naugle, and um, sorry, I will be talking this evening about blended learning in the elementary classroom, how I do it and what I do in my fifth grade. Am a teacher in the Jefferson Parish Public School System, and I am the Area 1 Director for LACUE. So welcome to tonight's webinar. Sit back, and I hope that you learn something new and interesting. And I will take, you may type any questions you have in the question and answer panel. Oops, sorry. And it will, I can answer those at the end. So let's get started. All right. It tends to auto collapse. So if you don't see the little side panel, you just click on this little green arrow and it will, I'm sorry, this little orange arrow and it will slide back out. All right. And mine keeps doing this. I'm sorry. Every time I hit it, it collapses my whole screen. All right. So let's get started. All right. Anyhow, if you're not sure what blended learning is, it is a combination of digital online media within a traditional classroom setting. It requires both a teacher, a student, and some device of some sort for them to have access to online material. And it also gives the students some control over the time, place, path, or pace of their own learning. There is an article that I've gone through several times on 12 types of blended learning that have been established and identified. And there are different types, and the one that I tend to use is what's called station rotation, okay, which allows the students to rotate through stations on a fixed schedule. And one of our stations is where the online learning takes place. So I currently teach math and science. So I have a 2-hour block in which to do that. So I know, actually it's longer than that. It's 2.5 hours. So I save the last part of it for science class so that we have about 45 minutes for science. So the rest of that block is for my math class. Okay, there are tools that I use to accomplish my blended learning. First of all, I need devices, and then I need a learning management system where the kids can go and access some information that helps them know different things that they can choose to work on after they finish their set assignments. Some of the learning management systems that you may have heard of are Edmodo, Google Classroom, or Moodle. Unfortunately, right now, Jefferson Parish is not a Google for Education school. Hopefully, we're becoming one shortly. So in the past, I have used Edmodo. Edmodo is a very safe and secure, what they call walled garden. It allows me to have the students in a class in Edmodo, and the only people that can interact in that class are the students and myself. I can also allow parent access if I choose. I have not done that in the past, haven't had a need to, but it is a pardon me, it is a built-in feature of Edmodo. So what I do every year is I set up my Edmodo classes. I log the students in, give them a code that they use to access the class the first time, and then once they've accessed the code and gotten into our classroom, all they need to do is log into Edmodo, and they're where they need to be. Another thing that I use in my classroom is flexible seating, because I find that there are times when they need to move around when I'm teaching. It's just a good. So I have several beanbags, chairs, and some separated desks that are in a different area of my classroom where the kids can go to do their computer work. One of the things that I've established over the years are my groups. I have gotten my Acer Chromebooks is what I use. Those are the devices I use. And they were not given to me by my district. I actually obtained these Chromebooks through writing grants on Donors Choose. And occasionally I even was lucky enough to win a couple of them by attending ed camps or other um, computer conferences around the country. So I have over 20 Chromebooks in my classroom. I do have some devices that were assigned to me through my district. So all in all, I really have been able to establish a one-to-one environment within my classroom. Okay, so I do have the capability for all students to be on the computer at one time, but that's not usually what's going on in my classroom. The computers, I believe in assigning them so that I can kind of keep track of, who's taking care of their computer, and if they're doing anything as far as getting on sites where they shouldn't be, I can check the history. One of the student jobs in my classroom is for what I call our computer manager, and that person's job is to make sure that all the computers have been properly stored in the cart and are properly connected to their chargers. The kids are pretty good about doing this, but occasionally they get a little crazy at the end of class and they forget to always plug them in. So there are occasions when my computer manager has to go through and figure out, whoops, this one didn't get plugged in yet, so that we're ready for the next class or the next day. And the kids are usually very responsible. Just know that at any time you have devices, be prepared. There are going to be accidents that occur. I have had a couple of my Chromebooks dropped. I've had a couple of cracked screens. I actually learned how to replace them by following directions on YouTube videos. So I was pretty proud of myself for doing that. This year I've had two kids. I have headsets for all of my computers, but unfortunately two of my computers, the kids in the process of plugging in the headsets or unplugging the headsets, have managed to pull the plug off, and it is now stuck inside the computer. So I have two of them that cannot have headsets at this time, and I'm trying to figure out a fix for that, but haven't come up with one yet. They're still usable, it's just that they can't be used with a headset at this particular moment. Okay, on Edmodo, the way that I handle the extra assignments that I want my students to do is each week I upload a Google document that lists things the students can do after they've completed their lessons that we're doing in the classroom on math or science each week. For years, I was an EAL, English Language Arts and Social Studies teacher, and this year I'm teaching 5th grade math and science. So let me just show you what one of these Google Docs would look like that they can access through Edmodo. So this is one that was set up for English Language Arts and Social Studies last year when I was teaching 4th grade. So you'll see there's a section for reading, spelling, and English, and then there's a section for social studies. And on here, it will say what we're working on during the week. It will let them go to sites like quizzes to play games that I've set up as homework assignments, and I can look at the reports each week and see who's accessed the quizzes game and what their score was. We also use Quizlet when we're doing vocabulary. So each week they have a Quizlet test that they can take over and over again to help them learn their vocabulary words. Okay, there are also Kahoot Games that I enable them to access. If there's anything digital as far as what we're doing in the lesson, I will also link to that. And same thing when, for English. I have set up a Google sort of like check-in for the kids. They have a password that they can access a Google Drive, and we do some of our work on the Google suite using Google Docs, Google Drive, Google Drawing, and Google Slides. Of course, and in social studies, the same thing. I make sure that all of my study guides are in Google Docs so that I can access them on this document. They can pull it up here, so when they get home, they cannot say that, oops, I forgot and left my study guide at home, because they always have access to it through here. Our school pays for a Brain Pop, so they have access to the full library of Brain Pop videos, both on Brain Pop and Brain Pop Junior. And then again, in social studies, we have used Quizlet and quizzes. And then I go online and I find usually some kind of interactive things that would go with what we were working on at this particular time. We were working on the Oregon Trail and the westward expansion. So there, I had them play the actual online version of the old Oregon Trail game that some of you might be familiar with. And since we'd already been studying citizenship in the past, that was our previous lesson, they had a quizzes game, they could go there. And then there were just some other things that we all use Mystery Science. So each week I would link to the Mystery Doug video that was published each week, even though I wasn't a science teacher. Most of the kids loved it, and it was just an easy way for them to get into. And then down here it says, remember to log in to Clever and click on Discovery and go to your assignments there. And I'll show you a little bit of that in a moment. So that was what one of the weekly documents for ELA and social studies looks like. And this is what one looks like for science and math. And it's going to look very similar. Okay, this is for this current week that we're in right now. And it's got all of our math things that are happening. It lists the homework. We're using Eureka Math so they can go to these YouTube videos and have the different Eureka Math lessons explained to them. We're also doing order of operations, so I linked to a couple of Khan Academy videos that would help them review what the order of operations are. Then they also had a rap that they could learn to help them remember the order of operations. And then the same thing, quizzes, Quizlet, etc. Then on science, they had a worksheet that was due. And this is an example of, okay, right here, they just click, and there's their homework worksheet for them that they can work on. If they lose a copy, they can make a copy at home, or they can request that we make another copy at school if they lose their original. So that's always nice to have. Each week, I also send these documents home to the parents via the Remind app, so that the parents also get a hard copy of this on their phones so they can access. And we're, of course, studying the Earth systems right now in 5th grade. So here are lots of links to things they can work on as far as that. Okay, so those are what I put up in Edmodo every week to help my students access all of the extra things they can do. Those aren't their daily lessons. Those are some extra things they can do. Pardon me for coughing. I'm on the tail end of a bad respiratory infection, but I still have the cough. So this is my math schedule. I do about a 30-minute whole group activity where we do our do now, the mini lesson of the day, and I check homework from the previous day. Then they break into 2 rotations of 40 minutes each. Half of them would be on the Chromebooks doing online lessons. We have a subscription-based program called iReady, which is a paid program for both math and ELA that our students access online, and they are required to do 45 minutes of iReady both in math and ELA each week. So that's how they do that. They do that during part of their rotation time. I also use Zern. Zern goes hand in hand with Eureka Math and follows the lessons that you do in Eureka Math. It's free, and the kids love it, and they earn badges, and they really enjoy doing their Zern lessons. and they're tasked with trying to complete 4 Zern lessons a week. MobyMax is another freemium kind of website that has both ELA, math, science, and social studies components to it. I've only ever used the free part of MobyMax, and the reason I would access it for math this year is to help those kids who are struggling with their math multiplication facts. It's a good, easy way to let them go and practice multiplication tables. Okay, so while they're split into their smaller groups, I can meet with the kids in the one half of the group for like 20 minutes each to do mini lessons with them, or to work on things they're having trouble with, or to give them some extra help on the daily lesson. And while we're doing that, the other ones, like I said, on their computers, doing Zern, iReady, if they get all their time in, because usually what happens by about Thursday and Friday, they've completed their Zern lessons, they've completed their iReady lessons. So that's when they would access that document I was just showing you, so that they could do some other things. I'm sorry, skipped ahead of me. Hold on. Okay. And then at the end of class, we do our 10-minute, we have a student debrief, and they can do their exit ticket for the day. So that's basically how my schedule works on a daily basis. Okay, some things the students need to know before you start doing blended learning with them, of course, is first of all, how do you get and return Chromebooks or computers or iPads or whatever device you're using in your classroom? Like I said, I have a cart where they are stored. The carts all have the charging cords on it. They have to know how to get there, how to unplug it, how to carefully carry it to their station where they're going to work, and open it up and access it. They also have to know how to log into Edmodo, which is our learning management system, and they have to know the websites that we're using. I glue a password sheet into the back of their daily planner, and on that website sheet, they list the website they can go to, and if it has a login information that they need. They also learn how to set an online timer. When you're in Google, you can just open a new tab and you can type in 10-minute timer, and as soon as you click enter, your 10-minute timer has started working. So the kids can have that open and going while they're doing their lesson. One of the rules I have in my classroom is that my students learn is that they need to ask 3 before me. If I'm going to be meeting with other kids and teaching small group lessons, I don't want to constantly be interrupted by tech questions, or something about I can't get on the website, blah 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 blah, something's not working. So they are tasked with asking 3 other students before me. If they can't find someone to help them out after going to 3 different people, then yes, I'm going to have to stop and help them. And then I remind them that I can see everything. I can see how much time they've spent on iReady. I can see what lessons they're doing on Zern, when they go to MobyMax, etc. I get reports on every site that I use and have them access, so that I know what they've been spending their time doing. And it's just kind of a way for me to keep them accountable for using their time wisely. Okay, why did I decide to use Chromebooks instead of another laptop or an iPad? Well, first of all was the cost, of course. I can buy a couple of Chromebooks for the cost of an iPad, and I like the fact that it's the OS operating system, so that when you open it, it's open, it's ready, and it's online, ready to go. They have a long battery life. We almost never have a problem with any of our Chromebooks running out of a charge before the end of the day. They're lightweight, which enables the students to walk around the classroom easily, carrying them and getting to where they need to be. Like I said, they're definitely cost effective. I like the fact that there is a keyboard, because our 5th graders have to take their state testing on computers, so it does help them learn keyboarding throughout the year. And then, of course, we can do various apps and extensions on a Chromebook. I'm going to take a pause a minute and see if any questions have come up. And I knew that was going to happen. All right, I don't see anything. Let's see questions. Okay, I got Tammy. Okay. Oh, I didn't bring my USB headphone home. Are we having trouble hearing, Tammy? I hope not. I've got my sound all the way up. All right, so didn't see any questions, so let me go back to my presentation. Okay, what can students do while they're on their Chromebook? Well, I've already discussed the fact that they do their iReady and Zern lessons. They can watch videos, either YouTube videos, Brain Pop videos, Discovery Education videos. They can take formative assessments. We're using a site this year called EduLastic, where we can create assessments in EduLastic and then push them out to our students to complete on a computer. And if it's a multiple choice question, they're graded for us. So the only part we have to grade are the constructed response questions, and we love using that. They can publish writing. They can do Seesaw journaling. If any of you use the Seesaw app, I love being able to access the Seesaw through the Chromebooks. They can create movies and presentations using things like Adobe Spark or Google Slides. They can do research for various projects they're doing, and we also use it for video conferencing by doing Google Hangouts. Okay. Our school is using the Clever app, which is a single sign-on for our students. So when they log into Clever, these are the things that they see that are readily available with one click. If they've logged into Clever, if they would click on the iReady icon, it takes them right into their iReady lesson. If they need to take an EduLastic test, they click on that, they're right there. If they need to check and see if I've assigned any videos from them to watch in Discovery Ed, they would click there. Access to Brain Pop, ReadWorks, etc. We did code.org during December during the hour of code, and then they still are using that as they go on and do some independent work this year. They love coding. Also, we can use many other apps and sites. We've talked about MobyMax. If you're not familiar with Seesaw, it's an online portfolio maker where the students can take pictures of anything they're working on, upload it into their Seesaw journal, then they can record their voice over it. They can annotate on the screen. They can add labels to things, and it's a really nice way for them to show what they're learning. Adobe Spark is an awesome site to use where you can create posters, you can create web pages, you can create videos. Book Creator, you can make storybooks, you could make math problem books, you could make a book of a science topic you're learning about with different chapters in it, things like that. We also strongly encourage our students to use the typing.com app so that they get better at keyboarding, so that when their state test rolls around that they're more proficient at actually typing. And like I said, I use Kahoot, Quizlet, and Quizzes pretty much on a weekly basis to add some gaming to our learning, our review work. Okay, now I'm going to take some time to show you some of the things that my students have done using their Chromebooks and using the blended learning station rotation time, other than just doing their lessons on things like iReady and Zern. When I taught ELA, we always took part in the GRA, which stands for the Global Read Aloud. It's an initiative run by Pernell Ripp, teacher in Wisconsin. Each year she picks books at different levels for each age group to read during 6 weeks at the end of October through November. And last year the book was, for my grade level, was The Wild Robot. So one of the activities my students did was they each created their own robot drawing in Google. And this is an example of one of my students' completed work. And what was fun about this activity is that during the Global Read Aloud, you're encouraged to connect with at least one other classroom or maybe a couple of different classrooms that are signed up and to do some sharing. So one day on a Google Hangout, my students shared the robots they had created in Google Drawing with another class. So it was a great way to make some classroom connections with other people. And they really loved being able to create their robots in Google Drawings. So that's an example of that. Another thing that we could do for reading teachers is to take a snapshot of a page they're reading in their textbook, upload that snapshot into Seesaw, and then they can actually read it and you can check their fluency. So I hope you'll be able to hear this.
And even his shoes were all bright yellow. He knew he probably lit up a neon color. He reached down and patted the dog, but he didn't have time to give her much attention.
So that gives you an idea. And what's nice about this is you can share that with parents and you can see how a child's reading fluency progresses throughout the year. You know, if you do it a couple times a year, you have one at the start of the year, one mid-year, and one at the end of the year, you should definitely be able to track how a student's reading fluency has improved. Research writing is part of what they do in fourth and fifth grade. Last year when I taught social studies, we did lots of different report writings, and this is an example. One of my students did on the bald eagle for social studies. So this is a picture of his thing. And what's nice about this is when I share it, students could comment on it and add comments to it. I did not have that happen on this particular thing. I can also comment on it and grade it that way. They make presentations using Google Slides. Sometimes they make their own presentations, but sometimes I did it as a class. So when we were doing landmarks and symbols last year, I divided the class up, and each pair of students were responsible for one of the class symbols. I'm sorry, one of the landmarks or symbols of our country, and they were tasked with creating a slide to go with that. And then, of course, what would happen is once we got our presentation together, we would find a classroom who was also in the same grade level studying the same thing. We would do a Google Hangout with them and we would share our work with them so that they could have a way of presenting to someone beyond our classroom. And of course, they always loved doing Google Hangouts. Okay. This is an example of a student using Adobe Spark to make a video, and he actually made a video about how we used our Chromebooks to learn.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and with my fellow friends, our class has learned how to use Chromebooks with our teacher's help. We use the Chromebooks to play Kahoot for when we do Google Hangouts. Kahoot comes at the very end of our Google Hangouts. We have done multiple slideshows this year, but my favorite one was a Margot slideshow. We had so much fun. We had presented it to another class during a Google Hangout. We also use our Chromebooks.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of them making their own video presentations, and that was fun. And of course, again, as an ELA teacher in the past, I always did a unit on poetry. And so one of the things they made was a poem gallery. And not all of our poetry is rhyming poetry. A lot of it is pattern poetry. So in her poetry gallery, she has acrostic poems. She has important poem, which is a format based on the Important Book by Margaret Weiss Brown. I like to use that as a mentor text to have them write important poems. She wrote one about her dad. Then she wrote a bio poem. This is another form poem that they write about themselves. She wrote another important poem about her family. And this is a nice keepsake for them to have. We wrote a five senses poem about something that was a color, and then they went with that. They learned how to write haikus, etc. So that was another thing, that a lot of this was done in the classroom during their station rotation time on the Chromebooks, so that they each had plenty of time to go into their Google slideshow and work on it. Okay, this year, if you took part in code.org, you know that the big thing was the dance party. And this is an example of one of my students coding the dance party from code.org.
Come on, turn the radio on. It's Friday night and I won't be long. Gotta do my hair, put my makeup on. It's Friday night and I won't be long till I hit the dance floor, hit the dance floor. I got all I need. No, I ain't got cash, but I got you, baby.
All right, so that gives you an idea of that. Okay, another kind of writing that we did, of course, as an ELA teacher was they have to learn how to write opinion papers. And so I spent a lot of time teaching that. And then they were tasked with jumping in on the debate about whether our class should have a hamster or an iguana as a pet. And this is an example of one of my students' opinion paper where she, has her introduction, and then she gives her reasons why she chose an iguana, and she actually quotes from an article that they read. They had an article about iguanas and they had an article about hamsters, and they were learning how to quote the article to help them bolster up their opinion writing. And then, of course, she ended it with a conclusion and asking what you thought you would choose for a class pet. And then another thing that I do every year in January is I do what's called the One Word Project. I don't know if you've ever participated in that as an adult, but each year, instead of writing New Year's resolutions, I pick one word that is going to be my word for the year, and I had my students do that. So this is an example where she picked the word brave. I asked them to say why they picked the word they did. They were asked to go find a picture or some graphic that went with their word, and then to also find a quote that included their word in it, and to put it together on these posters. So that was a fun activity. And this was presented to them on a hyperdoc so that they knew how to do it. And originally there were directions down on this side that took them step by step on how to complete their own poster. But at the end, when they're done, they have to eliminate all the directions. So that's an example of one of those. Okay, so that gives you some examples of work that my students have done during the blended learning that goes on in my classroom. I really enjoy teaching in a blended learning environment. I've wanted to do so since I learned about technology integration, way back in 2000, and I've been doing so ever since. In fact, I didn't retire after 30 years because I was having so much fun doing blended learning in my classroom that I decided to stay on and continue and help my kids learn to drive their own learning path. So, actually, we wrapped up a little bit early because I didn't want to keep you all here too long. And that is really my presentation about blended learning in the elementary classroom. Again, these things could be done on iPads if you have those instead of Chromebooks. And again, I'm going to check and see if there's anything in the panel that I need to look at. Any idea for the broken? Oh, you have an idea for the broken head jack? Oh, great, Tammy. Okay. And yes, we love connecting to other classrooms. That is a thing that I've done every year. In fact, I wrote a book about it with two of my connections on Twitter called Connecting Your Students to the World. If you want to check that out, it's in the Amazon store. And It talks about all the different ways we connect over the year. And thank you, Tammy, for being here. And that basically wraps up blended learning in today's classroom. Since I don't see any other questions, I am going to stop the recording and bid you adieu and hope that you have a great evening. And remember to keep checking back on the LACUE website for the upcoming webinars. Thank you for being here and good night.